Hello, Terence. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Terence, I'm going to call you Terry because that's how I feel about you.
That's good. You know, the only person who ever called me Terence was my mother when she was mad at me. So whenever I get cold calls from salespeople, I know it's somebody I don't know because they're asking Terence, and I usually say I'm not here. But Terry is good.
So Terry
Sometimes people think I am a mother, but a different type of mother. what can I tell you?
That remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say motherfucker because I want to make you feel at home on The Sopranos.
Hey.
Absolutely.
And that's
now that the show is over, I'm really working at trying to clean up my language because that sort of stuff just rolls off my tongue so easily. You know, you go into the store and say, "Where's the fucking milk?" You know, stuff. You know, it just doesn't play in the real world. You know, so it'll probably take me a couple of months to sort of get back to normal. But I don't know if my normal is probably closer to The Sopranos anyway. So
me too, bud.
Well, as long as you don't walk into mass talking to the priest that way, you'll be okay.
Hey, can I get some fucking communion wafers over here?
Jerry Falwell, I'm not so worried about. You can talk to Jerry Falwell.
Don't have to worry about him anymore.
Yeah, well, isn't that a riot? The mystery for him is over.
Absolutely.
And I think it's
I was watching Larry King last night, and Jerry Falwell, they played an old show where Jerry Falwell was on with Larry Flint from Hustler magazine. At one point, Larry Flint said that they'd actually become friends later in life. And Flint said that at one point he was in his office and he got a call that Larry Flint was there. That Jerry Falwell had stopped by just to visit, and it was pretty shocking. And he really just said this, apparently just to say hello. But I had my suspicions that he wasn't trying to get a free subscription or something. But who knows? You never know.
Is it really surprising that a minister goes askew into the sex world? They all preach one thing, and then behind the scenes, they've got a 12-year-old boy that they
absolutely. I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school, and the minute I heard that masturbation was a sin, they lost me. I was like, this is just not going to work. You're 11 years old. I think that's against the rules. Right off the bat, there's a fundamental flaw in the system. And the whole, to ask a person to, it's obviously the basis of life, to curtail that and say, all right, well, you have to give up sex. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff, all the others I could do,
11-year-old, how about 30? Don't knock my hobbies. Everybody needs a hobby. Obviously, exactly. A group of guys that have obviously never been married, if they're knocking masturbation, it's the only thing that gets you through like year 5 of the marriage when the rose is off the bloom. The bloom is off the rose.
Absolutely.
Now, listen, we want to talk about a lot of different things, but let's start with your great movie, which I've seen, Brooklyn Rules. Alec Baldwin, Freddie Prinze Jr., Jerry Ferrara, who's Turtle, on Entourage, and Scott Conn. Now, this is a different type of a mob movie and a great departure, I think, from The Sopranos. Where did that come from? Was that you growing up with this group?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not even sure if it's sort of a mob movie. It's also really a movie about friendship and loyalty with a mob backdrop. And it certainly has a lot of mob element in it. This is really it's a semi-autobiographical story about me and my 2 best friends growing up in Brooklyn. We grew up on the same block. I don't know how familiar you are if you're from the East Coast, but you sort of, it's pretty crowded over there, and you tend to make very intimate relationships with people because you walk out of the house and there's 50 other kids standing there. So if you can't make friends there, you'll never make friends. But we go back really.
Where in Brooklyn did you grow up? My cousins and aunts and uncles, they live in Bay Ridge.
Yeah, it's actually very close to Bay Ridge. It's an area called Marine Park, and I actually, in later life, lived in Bay Ridge when I was about 20. But this is Marine Park, Sheepshead Bay, that area. And, the 3 of us were just incredibly tight. And, I had come out to L.A. in 1991. I started working as a television writer, and I wanted to write a movie. And I started playing around with things, different ideas, and I started writing a big, Jackie Chan action movie, and, I get to about page 20 and it wouldn't really work. And then I was trying to write some big stupid comedy about a butler, and, it petered out, around page 30. And then, it's like a cliche among writers that says, well, write what you know. And I just sat down one day and I just started fooling around about, just writing a scene with me and my 2 friends in a diner that we used to hang out with, just let the characters start riffing. And obviously because I know these guys so well and I know their rhythm so well, the ball breaking started and the dialogue started to flow. And before I knew it, I had a scene. And I wasn't even really specifically writing toward anything, but it just started to take shape. And it got exciting for me because it felt really right. And I stopped writing. I thought about an outline and came up with a story. I outlined it, and I just went back in and just wrote this movie. And I wrote it in like 17 days.
Wow.
And it just sort of came out of me.
What about rewrites? What about rewrites?
What you see on screen is very, very close to the original. We trimmed a little bit. I mean, just, as it got closer to actually being made, because of budgetary concerns, different locations had to change. But in essence, it is 90% the first draft of what I wrote. I'm enormously proud of it. I mean, because I was always liked the script, but just the fact that to sit in a movie theater with your two best friends and watch three actors play you and have verbatim conversations that you had in life is beyond surreal. I mean, it's just really, it's just amazing. And
now, why didn't you direct it?
I had not directed until very recently, and it's funny. I had been a writer for many years, and people always ask me, "Well, do you want to direct?" And I say, I guess so, but not really. I'm very happy being a writer. And somebody said, "Well, you want to direct when somebody screws up something you write that you care about." That did finally happen to me, and on a different movie called Get Rich or Die Tryin', that was vastly different from what I wrote, and largely because Jim Sheridan changed the script so much, and that was a very big disappointment for me. And I've been used to very very strict interpretations of my writing. The Sopranos scripts are shot verbatim, they are performed verbatim, there's no ad-libbing. What we write in the script, if I gave you a script from The Sopranos and you read it along, it is the identical show.
Oh.
So I wasn't used to having people take my work and change it, just make wholesale changes without my consent or consultation. And Michael Correnti was no exception. Michael filmed the script that, Brooke was as written. He loved it. He had me on the set with him the whole time. We, talked about anything we wanted to. If there were minor changes, we discussed them and proceeded from there. At that point, by the time I was making this movie, I still really wasn't hell-bent on being a director. And then, after a couple of, after the experience with Get Rich or Die Tryin', I just thought, it's time. And I was lucky enough to direct the Sopranos episode that I wrote, that was on a few weeks ago.
Which one was that?
It was called Walk Like a Man. It was the episode where Christopher, it ends with Christopher killing Tim Daly's character, the writer, JT. Christopher sort of goes off the wagon and ends up throwing a guy out a window, and Paulie destroys his lawn.
That was a great episode. That was a great episode.
Thank you, yeah. It was really, my only regret is that I hadn't started directing sooner, because I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, if you're producing too, you have a say in the film, and it's a hard thing when the director has a completely different vision. You wonder what drew him to the project other than just the paycheck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you certainly, it's obviously a collaboration and a collaborative process, and I'm always open to discussion. But I always make the analogy. It's like if you're building a house and you're working with a set of architectural plans, and then you just decide to start moving windows and doors and pillars around without consulting the architect, and it's very possible your house isn't going to stand up. And it's very similar to structuring a story. You might end up with a house, but it's not the house you designed, and it's not the best house it's going to be. And particularly if you have, if you want to make changes, that's fine. But I always say, well, at least let's discuss it and let's talk about why and whether or not it serves the story. So back to Brooklyn Rules, that was completely not the issue at all. I mean, Michael Correnti could not have been more of a collaborator, and just, absolutely loved the material. He was absolutely the right guy to direct the material. Within 5 minutes of meeting Michael, I knew this was the guy. He totally understood it.
But isn't it amazing how sometimes it's like in every other area of life that you connect with somebody and it is collaborative, and they've got ideas to kick up a scene or a setting or the way they want to shoot it, and you start a dialogue going back and forth, and it makes it better, as opposed to some of these guys that are complete control freaks, and they're going to show you the way
exactly.
And yet they don't know how to write it. If you gave them a blank piece of paper, they can't write it.
Yeah, or it's at least the idea is that, the words don't fall on the page by accident, and I always say, well, if you want to change it, fine, but at least let me have my day in court. Ask me, why is this scene written this way, and why is this scene in the place it's in? And if I can't explain it and I can't defend it, then maybe you're right and I'm wrong, but at least I'd like to have, let me explain to you why I did it this way, or that this scene sets up another scene that's coming later, etc. And I think in large part it boils down to ego sometimes. And again, that was what was so great about Michael. Michael would take a good idea from the guy, serving, at the craft service table, or the guy sweeping the floor. If you have a better idea, he's willing to hear it and consider it and use it if it works. And it's really a testament to how comfortable he is in his own skin as a director, that he's not threatened in any way by anybody else's bid. If it's a better idea, he's absolutely open to it.
Well, ultimately, he's going to get credit for doing something brilliant if it works. And you, as the writers, if an actor can improvise a line, you're going to love it. And who knows that you didn't write it? You're all for it too. Why wouldn't you be?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. I mean, as writers, you have to, I always remember, it starts with the writing. It doesn't end with the writing. There's a long way to go, after a script is written, and there's so many people who have to do a great job, and so many things have to go right in order for you to end up with a satisfying movie. And you can't just be married to your own vision completely and your own work completely. And that's what's so great about it. It is such a collaborative process. And when you have people firing on all pistons, you have a cast that gets it and are bringing something to it, and a director and a cinematographer and wardrobe people. I mean, across the board, everybody's got to do their job well, and when it works and it's satisfying, it's just magic, and I really think it works here.
Well, we had Richard Wink on, who wrote 16 Blocks, and we were talking about this very same thing, and he was saying, listen, you write a movie and you have it in your mind, and then the movie you shoot is going to be different than what you envisioned, because ultimately something's going to go wrong or someone's going to do something brilliant. Sure. And then once you're in the editing room, you're making your third movie, and then once you look at it again, you're probably making a fourth movie and a final cut. So you have to be open, but so many people are resistant. This is the way I want it, and he believes that people shouldn't direct their own work because they're so locked in. But the problem is just what you said. You get the wrong guy who's not your advocate. The only advocate is for himself. You create a real problem, and now your name's on a piece of work that isn't what you intended. That's got to be really hard to deal with.
It is. It's a little, you get very, you do something you're really proud of, and then it ultimately, turns out, not what you intended. Your name is still on it, and ultimately, the resemblance to what you wrote in the first place, it's hard to take. But it is the nature of this business, and it happens probably more often than it should. But you have to hope for the best.
Well, you wrote Brooklyn Rules, which starts tomorrow, and Alec Baldwin does what Alec Baldwin does. He steals every movie he's in. And he certainly,
he absolutely does.
He's believable. He's the nice guy that I'm familiar with that is likable, is charismatic, is affable, and then turns right around and whacks you upside the head.
Alec got that part down really well.
Doesn't he?
And it's amazing. Yeah, he's electric. I mean, the guy walks on screen, your eyes go right to him. He is an amazingly compelling actor. He always has been. This role is great because it is exactly that. And it's true. In real life, a lot of these guys are extremely charismatic people. They're funny, they're friendly. Just don't be in the position of owing them money, or don't be perceived that you are trying to take their money. And as you see in the film, in a very gripping scene, Alec, sort of teaches somebody that lesson in a very harsh way. And the scene ends with Alex sort of splashing that movie star smile, and you've just seen this guy just do this unbelievably horrific violence on somebody, and you just can't believe that this is the same person who is smiling like that. It's just really amazing.
We don't tell people what they do. We'll just say it entails a meat slicer. That's all you need to know. It's a delicatessen meat slicer, and he isn't there to make a ham sandwich. Let's just say that. But Terry, nobody wants to fuck with you, I'm guessing. I'm sure that any of your friends, when you get upset at a waiter or whatever, everybody gets a little nervous because they think you have a very vivid imagination.
Well, that's the
you're doubling back in the parking lot.
Because Yeah, people always want, they think you're out of your mind because you come up with this horrible violence, and, they think, oh, God, are you capable of doing something like that? Or where did you come up with the idea of, I wrote the episode of The Sopranos where Ralphie beats a stripper to death, and, but people always go right to the place of, God, you must be really crazy if you come up with that stuff. But I also used to write on The New Adventures of Flipper, and nobody ever says, oh, you must really love dolphins, huh? I wrote on a show called Sister Sister about two teenage twin sisters, and nobody ever says, well, God, you must have a little girl living inside you. But they all think I have a homicidal maniac. You never just go to a place, oh, well, you're a writer, and that's what writers do, and you sort of just put yourself in the position of, okay, well, if I were in the mob, this is what I might do to somebody. But they only go to the crazy, dark places, not to the, nobody ever accuses me of, being a college professor if I write a script about one.
Exactly. You show Tony Soprano's lighter side, and then people don't go to that with you. They go to the homicidal maniac.
They go to they just think,
But Terry, it's like the guy who beats his wife and then he brings her flowers. He really just doesn't do the beating. So when you watch Tony Soprano,
I know,
torture,
beat her one time and that's it. Yeah.
And then he pats a little kid on the head and says, "Here's $20. Go get an ice cream."
Sure.
Like, what a great guy! Right. Terrific.
Right. Well, I mean, that's I think one of the things that makes the show so interesting is that people aren't just one color. I mean, people come in all kinds. There's all different shadings of behavior in people, and certainly mobsters too. I mean, these guys are killers. They're also family men in the other sense. They love their wives, their kids. Some of them are very sensitive. They love animals. They have opinions about things. Very much like you and I do. They have movies they like, things they don't like, and they kill people. So, it sort of runs the spectrum of human behavior, and that's what makes it interesting. I think in a lot of mob movies, criminals are depicted just as all one way, just badass across the board, and, they're kind of one-dimensional. And I think, certainly what we've done on The Sopranos is show those other dimensions, and I think what we've done in Brooklyn Rules, too, is the same thing. It's a lot of gray areas.
Now, on the board here, we're getting lots of comments that people love you, they love their show. We've got a Campia from Toronto is saying that Alec Baldwin rules. And Beautiful is asking you, what do you suggest for a new writer? What are some key tips to streamlining your writing so it's quality out of the gate and you're not looking like an amateur?
Well, I mean, the way I did it was I studied other writing that I really admired. I read every script I could get my hands on. I read every book on writing I could get my hands on. I still do. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I still learn. If I spend $20 on a writing book from somebody else and I get one piece of advice that makes sense to me, it's well worth it. It's well worth the time to invest in that. The key is write. That's the other thing. Writers write. Write every day. You will get better at it. Look how things are done in films you admire. Read the script along with the movie. Study it. I mean, this is like any other business. It's a craft that you can learn and get better at. I don't think you can teach somebody to be funny. I don't think you can teach somebody to be particularly dramatic. But you can certainly teach story structure, and you can work at those things and get better. And it's like any other craft, whether you're painting or you're a carpenter. The more you do it, the better you get. And it really requires study. If you were selling real estate, I would expect you to know about architecture. I'd expect you to know about the different styles of building styles and things like that. And there's so much that goes into being a writer that goes even beyond the actual written word. I mean, if you want to be in the film business, study film history. Learn from the masters. Learn who the different directors are, who your favorite writers are. Really apply yourself. I mean, people come out and say to me, I want to be a writer. I want to work in Hollywood. I always say, you realize what you're saying is akin to saying, I want to play for the Yankees. That's how hard it is. That's how many people want to do what you just said you want to do, and that's how few slots there are. So if you want to make it, really, you're going to have to apply yourself. There's a really terrific website called wordplayer.com, and it's written by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, the two guys who've written the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and Shrek. And it's a free website, and it's one of the things they have on it is a series of essays about screenwriting. Probably about 40 or 50 of them on every aspect of screenwriting, starting from the question you just asked me all the way up to just the most obscure aspects of this business, and is absolutely terrific. And I recommend that to everybody who asks me about writing. It's just fantastic.
That's
and of course, the book by Sid. Sid Field screenplay is a good place to start also.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Terry, don't you think, you talk about a couple of things, film history, and also I wanted to mention, don't you think editing, not falling in love with the things that you write, that you're to the point of...
Oh, absolutely.
To think that
that's the hardest thing in the beginning, for a writer. Initially, I started out in sitcoms and I started out writing, you write a spec script, which is a sample script of a show that's already on the air. And that sort of gives people an idea. If you write a Seinfeld episode, for example, they're familiar with Seinfeld and they can read your script and say, oh yeah, that sounds like Jerry or that sounds like George, etc. And, you'd write these scripts and I would do it and people would say, well, this scene is a little long and you don't really need that joke. And I'm like, what do you mean? I have to cut that, and you become, it's so funny looking back now, 15 years later. I mean, you just cut entire scenes without even thinking about it. You just get so married to your own words and your own voice, and they say it's, you have to learn how to kill your babies, and it's really hard for a new writer to say, you know what, I gotta edit this. It doesn't serve the overall piece, and it'll just move faster without that joke there. It might be a great joke, or it might be a great sequence, or a great scene. I can't tell you how many things I've left on the cutting room floor. That's sort of an outdated expression, so we do everything on an Avid computer now. Or how many scenes we've left in cyberspace that never made it onto The Sopranos, or any number of other things I've worked on, just because they just didn't work. Or
don't you think, too, writing what you know? I met somebody the other day, and he was telling me how he was going to had this idea for a script, and he was going to write it about a pool room hustler, and it was going to take place in a pool room. And I said, do you play pool? No. Have you spent any time in pool rooms? No. And I said, well, how the hell are you going to write this if you didn't spend any time? And the thing that I see about The Sopranos when I started watching is, who's ever writing this knows these characters, who's seen it, because there's a difference to me when I watch The Sopranos and you see all these knockoff gangster shows. This is Hollywood trying to do the same thing but different, but the guy who came up with it has heard these conversations, and that's why we like these characters. That's why they ring true, because it's not bullshit. You're writing what you know. Can you speak to that a little bit for the young writers?
Yeah, I mean, in my case, I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up on the East Coast, and I do believe there is a different sensibility, at least in humor and certain ways of looking at the world from the East Coast and the West Coast. I grew up in Brooklyn, in a mixed Italian American neighborhood. Are
you Italian?
Sort of just. No, I'm English and Scottish, but literally every one of my best friends growing up was Italian American.
You got the crap kicked out of you a lot, didn't you? Tell the truth.
Actually, I didn't, because I hung around with guys who did the ass kicking, so I just stood behind them, so it was great. I was smart enough to make some tough friends.
And then
but
you
the guys, Bobby
line?
Canzoneri and Chris Galdovino are the two guys in Brooklyn Rules who were my two best friends, and Anthony Barlanti, Joey Teresi. I could rattle off names. It sounds like the lineup of an Italian soccer team. But yeah, I mean, I just sort of by osmosis, sort of just took these guys in, and I'm not really didn't have any direct experience with mobsters, but they're around. That's just the reality of where I grew up in Brooklyn, and you just sort of get the rhythms down and the cadence down. I was a fan of mob movies from Public Enemy. Scorsese, is one of my heroes, if not the big hero. And you just sort of it just sort of was the world I grew up in. And
well, you mentioned in Brooklyn Rules, you mentioned Murder Incorporated, which I thought that line was more for you than anybody else.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think the young people, they're not going to know what that is, but I got a real kick out of hearing you mention Murder Incorporated, because that's a great freaking movie that people forget about.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them. I mean, yeah, I'm sure the average young person who's watched Scarface 100 times doesn't know that there was an original Scarface with Paul Muni. The Al Pacino version is the only one for them, but that movie was, or that Scarface is Al Capone. I mean, that was the guy that's based on. And yeah, I mean, it's just, there's just so much of that stuff out there. But, it's like if I were to write a movie about cowboys, I don't care how much research I do, it's going to ultimately at the end of the day sound phony, or something's not going to ring true. And I think a lot of times what you see in Hollywood, or you see guys who, learned about the mob by watching other mob movies. You know, and instead of, wow, you lived in that area and you know what's real and what's not real. And it's that makes the difference, I think, and it certainly makes a difference on The Sopranos. I mean, David Chase is from New Jersey, where the show is set. He's Italian American. Same deal, you know, just got it, you know.
Terrence, I grew up in New York, and actually Timmy Van Patten lived in our neighborhood, and all the characters that you guys have incorporated onto The Sopranos is dead on either a family member or a family friend, or I remember having those barbecues in the backyard, you know, hey, take it easy, Joey.
Sure.
It's just all the characters are dead, even from the kids to how the kids react to their father's, you know, actions and reactions. Every character is just dead on, and it's well written. And
wow, are you from Massapequa or Brooklyn?
I am from Massapequa, actually.
Right. Tim originally grew up the first few years in Brooklyn and then moved to Massapequa. But yeah, Massapequa, I guess, is where we consider. Yeah, very similar. Massapequa, even though it's in Long Island, is very similar to the suburban area that New Jersey is in the show. So it is. You're right. I mean, those kind of characters, those barbecues, all that stuff is. Yeah, you know those people. And that's
you're
funny.
Living in L.A. now, aren't you?
I sure am.
Both of you are living in L.A. now, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's always I am. Everybody reminisces about the beauty of New York, but around here in the 90-degree weather.
No, because I can be.
Well, I had an apartment in New York until about a month ago. I literally just gave it up. I just had a kid, and we just decided L.A. was good for the first couple of years, maybe. But we'll be back in New York. I'm still there. I was straddling both coasts for the last 10 years.
Now, what you know? How hard is that for you to leave doing this show after all this time? It's got to be.
You know, yeah.
How do you feel about it?
It's very, very, very bittersweet. You know, I mean, if David Chase had come to me and said, I want to do 10 more seasons, I would have said, where do I sign? That said, we're ending the show at the right time. You know, those rule of show businesses get off the stage while people still want more. And, you know, we're 86 episodes, 86 hours with these characters. I mean, that's a long time to spend with any group of characters, no matter how compelling they are. And, you know, it's the right time. That said, you know, we've been doing this, you know, I started on the show in 1999. I've made some really intense friendships. That was the greatest job, and not just because the show was successful and popular, but just across the board. Everything about it was great. I mean, just to be able to do it in New York, to have that kind of creative experience, the creative freedom to tell those types of stories in the way we told them. You know, just, you know, you spend 15 hours a day working in a TV series like that, and you make really intense relationships with people. I mean, you spend more time with them than you do with your own family.
Right.
And it was just great. I mean, we had a ball. We laughed our asses off every day. Timmy Van Patten, who you just brought up, is a dear friend of mine who is just, you know, he's directed probably more episodes of mine than anybody. Probably we've collaborated maybe 10 or 12 times, and just had the greatest times doing it. And it's hard. You know, that said, you know, everything comes to an end, and onward and upward, hopefully. I don't know if it'll ever go
What about a
spin-off?
Well, because they're asking on the board, will there be a spin-off? Maybe AJ is going to take over the family business type of thing. Is that a possibility?
I've been trying to pitch a Broadway musical where Nathan Lane plays Tony, and so far nobody's interested.
Nice.
But
nice.
Yeah, you know,
good to see you haven't sold out.
Yeah, it might work. You know, I can just get it. You know, that's possible. I mean, you know, traditionally, you know, spin-offs, I don't know, I'm not really interested in doing that. I mean, I think I like the idea of leaving the show where it is, and any if that ever happened, it would be David Chase's call, and you know, I'll leave it there.
Well, you know what's interesting for me is that I didn't watch the show I never watched it. I had never seen a single episode for, up until a year ago. And then they were available on Netflix. And then the only reason I didn't watch the show is I didn't have HBO. So I got it on Netflix, and I became addicted to it. And I literally, over the course of like 3 months, watched every single freaking episode there was. And I've now seen every single episode. And I think it's brilliant what you've done right now with the close, because it could be anybody. Tony could go to jail. He could get killed. He could be the last man standing because he's smarter than everybody else. Killing Christopher the way he did was spectacular and made everybody go, wow. Even the way the therapist...
a gangster.
Yeah, even the way the therapist is looking at Tony now, looking at him differently. The mob boss that could rub him out. Tony making the comments that, hey, these are all they're my friends, but let's face facts, they're all murderers. It could be anybody.
Right.
And it could be his wife. And by the way, I would be my wife is the entertainment writer for Time magazine, and she would be very upset with me if she didn't, because she believes that Tony's wife is the most intricately written, most complex, most interesting female character ever written in the history of television.
Wow, that's quite a compliment. That's great. Wow.
Well, if you think about it, I know you're prejudiced, it's your character, but what character, name me a character, I said this the other day on the show, name me a character, a female character on any other show that has the complexity of this charter. There isn't.
Ricardo.
Lucy
was pretty deep. Aside from her, you're right. I mean, I think
Lucy wasn't having somebody whacked. Lucy wasn't telling the principal that I'll have my husband whack you if you ever come near me.
I think they had a story where she was trying to take out Fred Mertz, but I think they ended the series before they got to film that one. You're right. I mean, I think it's a lot of times, again, and I credit, HBO for allowing the kind of in-depth storytelling and complicated storytelling that you do on network television. A lot of times it is more cookie cutter, it's one-dimensional characters, and they're not afraid to let you explore people's, inner workings, and, people, like I said before, it's, they come in all different colors, and no one of us is any one thing. And Carmela certainly, one of the things David Chase always talks about the show, about the characters he created, are that all of them have made a deal with the devil. Right. From Melfi to Tony to Carmela, certainly. She knows who she's married to, but she's made that deal because she wants that lifestyle and that house and everything else and that goes with it. And she, accordingly, is a very complicated person. And the ability to write that complexity is just so freeing, and it's just been great.
Now, Terry, what is your feeling right now, the political correctness that's going on? And I'm not saying what Don Imus said is right, because I don't think it is. But you see there's right now, you see all of these radio disc jockeys are getting fired, suspended. What anybody says is being looked at under a magnifying glass for racist. Now, you have a show that depicts Italian Americans in a certain light that I'm sure they don't like, and you have a certain freedom on HBO that you don't have in other areas. What is your thinking in general about what's going on, freedom of the pen? I mean, even it goes beyond that right now, the new regulations, rating system that they're going to put into effect regarding smoking in movies, that they're going to give you a bad rating if you glorify smoking. Who are these people to judge? Who are they? And is it smack of McCarthyism?
It all traces back to money. Network. When I worked in network television, if you wrote a joke that offended one person in Alabama, you wrote a joke about albinos, and they got a letter from an albino saying, "I found that joke very offensive." You would get a letter from the studio, the network, "No more albino jokes." They live in fear of people not buying the soap that they're selling on the network. I mean, the networks live and die by ad space and selling commercials. So, of course, they don't want to offend anybody, because they offend somebody, well, I'm never going to buy another, IBM product again, or whatever it is you happen to be advertising. HBO is different because they're not beholden to advertisers. It's a pay subscription service. So you are either, if you don't want it, you don't buy it. And if you want it, you buy it. And it's fine. So they don't have to worry about who's offended or not. If you're not offended, if you're offended, you'll cancel the subscription service. So people, artists now are being forced to, absolutely water down their work to the point where don't offend anybody, make sure everybody knows exactly what everybody's thinking at the same minute they're thinking it. Don't make it too difficult. Don't be too highfalutin. Don't be too this, too that. It's got to be just sort of this homogenized version of lowest common denominator crap that is just spooned out there. And that's why when you look at what's on TV, it doesn't make you think. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't offend you. And it's a shame because I think, I don't know who all these people are that are so offended, walking around offended at everything. If something offends me, I avoid it or I change the channel. I can't even remember the last time offended by something. I mean, that's
watch an old episode of All in the Family.
You couldn't do that in a million years. You couldn't do that again today.
You couldn't do it.
I mean, the pendulum swung. We're back into the Eisenhower years, and you're letting people forget what free speech is. I mean, I think they forget what the founding principles of this country were. Is that it's okay if you're offended. You don't have to believe what I believe. I can go, say whatever I want. That's fine. It's okay. And you know what? Tony Soprano can strangle somebody with his bare hands, and the next day, the water's still running, and the electricity's still on, and the world is still functioning, and it's okay. You can deal with it.
Hey, you said Tony Soprano is an extreme character. Obviously,
right.
It's entertainment,
sure.
But I think it is very relative to who we are as human beings, that we all are not one thing. We do
right.
lose our temper and yell at our wife or say the wrong thing to our kid or screw somebody and then feel guilty about it or whatever the case may be. And we're whitewashing everything like it's the politicians. You look at the Republican debate the other night, it's 9 white guys, middle-aged, all saying the exact same thing. It's hysterical.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and so much of it is being, the religious right obviously, plays a large part in all this stuff. And for me, I mean, these are the scariest people out there. Talk about, preaching, not practicing what you preach. I mean, God Almighty. I mean, this is like, this is some scary stuff.
Well, believe what you want to believe. Just don't tell me I'm going to burn in hell because I don't believe what you believe. That's the problem I've got.
Exactly.
Go with God. Yeah. Enjoy yourself. Maybe you're right and I'm wrong. I'm willing to say that, but don't tell me I'm destined to burn in hell. But listen, speaking
Well, I will say this though: if you don't go see Brooklyn Rules this weekend, you absolutely will go to hell.
Well, obviously.
Well, everybody out there.
No, you're not going to.
I swear.
Tony Soprano's gonna come and visit you first.
Yeah, that too.
Now listen, I want to, before we let you go, I want to talk a little bit about Brooklyn Rules a little bit more because I think this is a terrific little movie that people should go see. And Scott Conn, I did not know it was James Caan's son. And when I first, But when I first started watching the movie, I literally said, who the fuck is this guy? Was he doing a James Caan impersonation? I wanted to slap him. and then I realized it was his kid. And then when I looked at him differently, and I said, wow, he looks like a young James Caan. He's got the broad shoulders, the square jaw. He sounds like him. He's a good actor. He's very charismatic. And I wonder if it hurts him that he's so much like his dad. But if you grew up with your dad, you sound like your dad.
That's in his DNA. He's not. I mean, he's not an impersonation. They walk the same way they talk. The funny thing is, on the set, Scott did do an impersonation of his dad for us. He did Sonny Corleone from The Godfather. We were absolutely on the floor. Really? It is uncanny. I mean, so the difference is huge. I mean, when he does James Caan, it's a completely different guy. But I mean, you can't, obviously they look alike, they carry themselves the same way. But Scott is an unbelievably talented actor, and also a really talented writer. He was great. I mean, that's what, the casting of these three friends in this movie was so key for me, and it was also so challenging because I know they're based on real people. So, Scott, just had to get everything right, and he did. I mean, he totally captured what the character he's based on is about, and of course brought his own stuff to it also. But he was, he again is just one of these electric actors. He comes on screen and he's just a joy to watch and was a joy to work with. Really funny guy.
I want to make sure people have a sense of what the film is, and it's these young guys who growing up and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their life, go to college, join the mob, which is a viable alternative at that point for some of these guys.
Three friends with sort of differing ambitions. One, the lead, played by Freddie Prinze Jr., who's based on my character, is sort of a guy caught between two worlds. He's in his 20s. He goes to college in the city. He goes to Columbia University, although he's a blue-collar kid from Brooklyn. And his two best friends are blue-collar guys. One of whom, the Scott Conn character, is a guy who's sort of flirting with the mob as a possible career choice, as some guys in neighborhoods do. And the third friend, played by Joey Ferrara, is based on my friend Bobby, who just wants to settle down, get a job in the post office, and lead a simple life. And, these three different ambitions sort of collide when an incident happens that sort of pulls them into the world of the mob. And it ultimately comes down to a question of loyalty and how much these guys are going to hang together for each other in an incredibly dire situation. And that's really what the movie's about. I guess it's really about the choices we make and the friendships we make and how far you're willing to go for your friends.
Well, it's a really fun movie, and I think people are going to love it, especially the young kids. I think are really going to like it. And you got three.
Yeah, I think I said if you like The Sopranos, you will like this movie. Even though it's technically a drama, I think there's a lot of comedy in it, and the comedy is very organic to the way these guys break each other's balls, just the world that they live in. The humor comes from real situations and real conversations, and just the way this is. I mean, much like real life. Sometimes the biggest laughs you've ever had have been in the most tense situations you've ever been in. I think there's a lot of that in this movie too. So I think there's kind of something for everybody. And there's a love story. You got Nina Savari and Freddie Prinze Jr.
Well, I think it was a good casting because I think these guys in real life are all pretty down-to-earth guys. It seem like it hasn't gone to their head. I think it comes across on the screen. So
I think a huge surprise for people is going to be Freddie Prinze Jr. I only knew Freddie as a teen heartthrob guy, and he was in the Scooby Doo and everything. He came in to read for us, and I was like, wow, this guy's got soul. He's deep. He's funny. He's smart. And this is a role that's completely unlike anything he's ever done before. And he really, it's just sort of, he fit right into it, and he absolutely is terrific. And I think that a lot of people are going to be really surprised by how different Freddie is from what they've seen before. And I think you're really going to come away with a completely different view of who this guy is.
Well, it opens tomorrow, right? Nationwide?
It does. Yep. It's in limited release. It opens initially in New York, L.A., Boston, and Rhode Island, I believe. That's where Michael Correnti, the director, is from. And then it will roll out from there into bigger and better places.
Well, I was going to say, how the hell did
New York. I was going to say, well, Paris, London, the moon,
Well, we've got a worldwide audience here that are listening. We've got a lot of people in the UK that are listening to you right now. A lot in Ireland and Scotland and what have you. And a big Canadian contingent. A lot of Canadians here on the board too. So, at any rate, man, we really appreciate you coming on. I look forward to meeting you sometime, and I wish you all the luck. Brooklyn Rules will post it here on the board, and we'll talk about it some more to make sure people know, and we'll be glued to the TV waiting to see who offs who and who's the last man standing in the group on The Sopranos.
All right. Ooh, stay tuned. Well,
good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
real pleasure.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.